One of the questions that I'm asked the most is how did I know what to focus on and in what order to cut my handicap to go from 34 to 9 in a year. So in this video, I've broken down that drop in my handicap over the year into 3-month stages, and I'm going to share that data with you, looking at what the drop was over that timeline, but also what the steps were that I think had the biggest impact on my game to help that fall in my handicap happen. So the first block is August 2021 to November 2021, where I cut my handicap from 34, my first handicap, to 21. And I really think the focus here for me was just about getting to grips with things, getting to grips with the course. I also added it to my bag at the time. The longest club that I had in the bag was a 6-iron, so I added in driver and a 4 hybrid. I later went on in the November to add a 3-wood, and I struggled for a long time with those longer clubs. I think because from the get-go I'd just been playing with irons, so I'd always been teeing off with a 6-iron or using the irons because that was the longest club that I had in the bag. But adding in a driver and then eventually the 3-wood just felt like a completely different swing, and I really struggled with it. Like, I struggled with it big time in terms of getting it off the tee to start with, but then if I did, it would be a massive slice. And so in that stage, getting to grips with those clubs really helped me just save those provisionals off the tee where you're already feeling like you're on a bit of the back foot when it comes to scoring. The other focus of mine in that time frame was also getting to grips with my distances. So I used to go to the range where there'd be a top tracer or a trackman, hit about 5 balls with each club and just try and get a rough idea of what my distance was for each club. Again, looking back, I think at the time I probably focused more on total distance, whereas now I would know to focus more on carry distance and then be able to adapt based on weather conditions like we've got today, lovely rain, or if it's in the summer and you want to allow for a bit more run on the ball. But even just to get me started and get me going, getting that idea of my distances really helped me make the right choices when I was on the course. Because looking back at that 34 to 21 handicap Jess, I feel like I had the distance. I don't know where it came from, but I oddly was able to sort of get on okay to my handicap. But then it would be also my putting, so either those provisionals off the tee in the first place, or you're off the back foot, or the putting. So I'd get to the green okay, but then just waste shots with my putting that would really let me down. So that was my focus, getting to grips with those longer clubs, getting to grips with the course that I was playing, getting to grips with my distances, but then also really trying to get to grips with my putting so that I didn't feel like I was doing all the hard work to get onto the green, but then just waste shots away. So that was that stage from 34 to 21. And then we go from 21 to 17. So that was 21 in the November to 17 in the February of 2022. And this is really for me where I think the biggest impact was that my practice just kicked up a gear. This is when I started to really use my data-driven approach that I love, using my background in product development to really look for where I could make the biggest impact in my scores. So not necessarily even looking for changing things technically, really trying to actually more focus on just having a playable swing at this point. I still really struggled with all of the things that I do now, but a lot more back then, my rolly wrists, my over the top. In fact, actually one time a member said to me, I actually have no idea how you hit the ball, how you managed to actually get the club to hit the ball. And all I thought was you and me both. But really for me, it was just focusing in on that phase, on harnessing my practice, making sure that it was as productive and purposeful as possible. And the way that I would do that is that when I played, I would just look for that low-hanging fruit in my game. So I'd ask myself, what's the one thing that really let me down today? Or what was the one area of my game where I leaked the most shots? And typically, again, at that stage, from the 21 to 17 handicap, it was either the accuracy into the green, so really trying to, now I'd got a bit more of things in play off the tee, that accuracy with distances but also direction into the green. But then when I was on the green, really trying to just shave off those 3 putts where possible. So again, it doesn't feel like you've done all the hard work, but then maybe let yourself down. But that's what I would do. I would really look every time I played, I'd keep a track of my putts, but I'd also ask myself what other areas were there. Maybe it was my chipping that if I was struggling with thinning it through the back of the green, that would then leave me with so much work to do, or greenside bunkers. And again, I would then just use that data to decide what I was going to focus on in my practice in the hope that it would help me the next time that I played. I also at this stage, between that November to February, was playing in a lot of matches for my club, and I think although that was terrifying at the time, especially being quite new to golf, it definitely helped me to get more confident in my game, because going into a match, especially singles match play, can be quite daunting, but it really asks you to kind of tap into your best golf on that day. And because you're playing against the other person rather than the course as such, you're really able to make decisions and adapt to what's going on. And I think learning to do that through that almost like baptism of fire of matches actually really helped me when it came to playing when I had a card in my hand in a competition. So if I had to summarise the steps that helped me go from 21 to 17, I'd say it's that real purposeful practice, choosing that low-hanging fruit in my game and looking for that when I was playing. Also then, by this point, I definitely got to grips with driver and the longer clubs in my bag, so I had that gain of distance from what used to be just my 6-iron off the tee. And also trying to, where I could, rein in those provisionals, but also my putting as well. That was a big one. Really just not wanting to feel like you'd done the hard work and then let it kind of go on the green when you'd got there. But also the matches, learning to build my confidence and play a little bit more under a sense of pressure by having those matches, building that bandwidth for playing well under that pressure, and then being able to bring that to my own game when I had a card in my hand. And then the next drop was from 17 in the February to 14 in the May. And when I look back on that window, that stage, I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is actually my equipment. So I got new clubs at this stage because my swing had changed quite a bit, not necessarily technically. It was still very rolly wrists, over the top, but I just got more confident in my swing. So I think my speed had picked up and it really became time to actually change my shafts. So I got Callaway clubs, changing from more of a senior flex in my shafts to just a regular flex. And that really had such a big impact. Straight away, I noticed that on my accuracy, my dispersion around the green. I'd gone from feeling like I was leaking shots and not really knowing why, other than obviously my swing, to then actually with the new clubs, feeling like I could focus on a target and most of the time send the ball there. And that was really that big change for me in knowing that the impact that equipment can have on your game and having the right equipment. So I went for a fitting at Callaway and made sure really that those clubs were then best fitted to my swing at that time, but also hopefully the swing that I would also then continue growing into. And also throughout this time, I was still with my purposeful practice, really looking for that low-hanging fruit and then just going deep on the area that would have the biggest impact on my scores the next time that I played. So now we have the big one, the drop from 14 to 9. And this one, this was a stretch. I really remember this because it felt so close to the wire as to whether I was going to do it to hitting my own self-imposed deadline of 12 months. And I'd given myself that deadline just to really focus myself. I've mentioned this before in a previous video that I really enjoy the challenge of something, of going after something and having to align our actions to our ambitions to see what's possible when we do really go for it rather than feel like we're dancing around the edges. And so in this last stage, that 3-month run to whether I was going to hit my deadline of getting to single figures, I think the things that had the biggest impact is that by this point, I'd actually feel like I'd been able to plot myself around the course better. So I think all of the other stages, when I look back on them, from getting to grips with the longer clubs in my bag, growing my bag from just 6-iron maximum to adding driver, 4 hybrid, 3 wood, getting to grips with that swing, getting the ball off the tee, being able to save it from anything worse where you're already a provisional, or then reining it in from my putting, trying to, where possible, to shave off those 3 putts and not feel like I'm wasting shots when I've done the hard work of getting to the green, all the way through to then playing in competitions to build my confidence at that stage and be able to feel like I can play well under a sense of pressure, through to then actually using that data-driven approach of focusing my practice on that low-hanging fruit, on that one thing at that time that was going to have the biggest impact on my game. But now all of those things had added together, and it was very much about the belief. Can I actually go out there and play to single figures? And that for me, I think, is something I'm still working on, that belief in my game, knowing that when we, are embarking on that 18-hole round or 9 holes possibly, rather than having that expectation of how we want to play and feeling maybe disappointed if we don't start well or start as we hope, or maybe feel frustrated if something doesn't go, a shot doesn't go as we planned, or it seems like our practice isn't quite coming out onto the course, rather than have that expectation and that pressure that really just felt like it didn't serve me at all, I was very much focused in this phase on almost surrendering to the score, which sounds a bit odd, I know, but I feel like in the last round that I played that got me down to 9, it captures it perfectly actually, because I'd played a couple of rounds leading up to this where I'd really piled the pressure on, and any time I didn't have a great hole, whether that was you know, a par that had escalated to a bogey or a bogey that had escalated to a double or beyond, I'd really feel frustrated. And I feel like all of that weight of wanting to score what I wanted to score would just feel like it really sort of took hold on my shoulders, even though that might have been at the start of the round and I had so many holes left to play. It just felt like it all escalated. It sort of like bubbled up and didn't allow me to focus in that moment on the next shot at hand. So the real change for me and the big lesson in that stage was that difference between having that pressure and letting it sort of crumble me, rather than maybe having the hope of how I want to score, but actually surrendering to the score, really focusing on one hole, one shot at a time, and letting that take care of itself. And as I mentioned, that last round really captures this for me, because I had the best front nine I'd ever had. I was 3 over, which we've got quite a tough front nine at West Surrey. So for me at the time, I was really happy with this. And I was almost thinking, I don't want to jinx this. Like, I don't even want to say anything about it. I don't want to, you know, pinch myself that this might not be true. So I carried on playing hole by hole. And then on the 12th, which is a little kind of tricky par 3, it's not too bad, but there's some tricky bunkers around it. And my bunker play at this point, not so great. It was okay, but not the best. I wouldn't really look at it and think that that was a strong part of my game. And I remember my tee shot on that 12th on the par 3 leaked into the bunker. And I think then I maybe got it out but went really long. So then I'm thinking, oh gosh, okay, like chances of a par here are pretty tight. Managed to get it close, but end up taking a double bogey. So again, tee shot but also putting came together there to let me down a little bit, and I got a double bogey. And I think this is the key for me. What I remember thinking at that point wasn't, oh great, like this is it, my score's gone now, that's going to be it, this is the last day that I've got the chance to really get to single figures, what are you doing, Ratcliffe? Instead, I remember thinking, and I don't think it almost sounds sort of arrogant, I guess, but it was far from that. It was more just wanting to channel confidence and be brave, I think, to say to myself, that's okay, I can get a birdie. So I knew I had a good stretch of holes left where I could possibly pluck off a birdie. And it happened, I did. So then straight away that double, rather than having that be the thing that made me crumble, I actually bounced back from it. And that muscle of being able to bounce back from a not great hole or a bad hole, I almost don't like calling them bad holes, but they are, aren't they? Ones we're not happy with. Building that muscle allowed me to get that shot back, feel like I was back on sort of where I wanted to be, tracking wise, for what could be a good score. And then I just really, something happened in that moment where it was like the intention actually came true. That intention of, it's okay, I can get a birdie, came true. And then I remember playing, and I don't think it was the best from then on, it was probably bogey. And then coming down the last, I just missed a really short putt on the 17th, which again, I was kicking myself about, but trying to think, this is okay. We've got a par 5 to finish. You've just got to par it or better, and we'll be okay. Good tee shot, topped my rescue, obviously, because I was trying to get it on the bloody green. From that moment, I then thought, okay, again, don't panic. Rather than kick yourself because you've just topped a shot, how frustrating, wasted. Instead of letting that get to you, I then took a 6-iron, looked really good going into the green, but it went long. I didn't know this until I got up to the green, saw that it was long. So at this stage, I'm thinking I need to get this up and down to even get par. If I just miss this, I'm going to be 1 over the score that I need to get me to single figures. So I took a pitching wedge. Back then, I hadn't yet learned the Dan Grieve stuff, which I shared last week. So I took a pitching wedge, chip and run, quite long. I think I left myself with about 9 foot. So I'm standing over the putt, and I've been putting pretty well that day. And I remember just thinking, we can make this. So I stood over it, hit the putt, and it went in. And something in that moment, I think, really just brought it home to me of the power of how we speak to ourselves or on the golf course, but also how we think about bouncing back after a bad hole. Do we let ourselves beat ourselves up, or do we use it as the fuel to bounce back and either try and just steady the ship, or if possible, try and go out there and chase it down to get some shots back? And I think that was the breakthrough for me for that stage in my handicap. From 14 to 9, it was really trying to go out there and play with a bit more of a chasing mindset, with a more positive mindset, not beat myself up if I had those wonky holes or if my practice didn't feel like it was quite coming to life on the course yet. Especially when you've put in so much time, it can feel really frustrating when you're like, well, I've practiced my chip and runs, why are they now struggling? Or I've practiced my rescue, why did I now top it when I needed to hit a good one on the 18th? But really it was just about that shift in mindset for me. And so partnering that shift, that's something I've really tried to build into my game even more so since, that really positive intention over every shot, but also trying where possible to let things go if they don't go as we hope, and back ourselves to go out there and continue playing to what can be our best and hopefully get some of those shots back, or at least steady the score. So there we go. Those were the stages, but also the steps that helped me go from 34 to 9. And I would love to hear, when you've broken through a barrier in your game, whether that's breaking 100, 90 or 80, or getting your handicap down to where you want it to be, what do you feel has had the biggest impact on your game when you've achieved that? Let me know in the comments below and I'll see you there.